Our first live FFPC main event of 2025. That's what we're talking about today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. And we are kicking off. Well, we already started a slow, but it's our first live draft. Shawn, we're kicking off main event season much earlier than usual this year. It's May 31st. We're starting our first draft. We drew the 111. The draft is already underway. If you want to follow along with the board, you can follow along at the RotoViz YouTube channel. The draft is moving. The board is not necessarily updating the way that I wanted to on the screen. There it goes. So we have Bijan Robinson went first, Jamar Chase, Saquon Barkley, Justin Jefferson, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua went 107, a guy that we're kind of maybe hoping could be around at 111. Brock Bowers falls all the way to 108 here. Man, you'd like to be the 108 in this room, or the 107 or the 106. We both like Bowers up near the top three in this tight end premium format. Again, this is the FFPC 2 running back, 2 receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flex format, which always gives you that flexibility to go a lot of different directions. We are currently doing our slow, I mentioned. And Shawn, we got the 110 in that. We started with Trey McBride actually at the 110. He usually goes around the 112. Bowers ADP much higher than this. There's a gap there, but Bowers fell all the way back. Now McBride goes 109. So who slid to us? Oh, it was Ginty who slid all the way down to us. Oh no, sorry. We're at the 111. Oh, and McCaffrey goes 110.
McCaffrey. So we could have either Genty or Neighbors.
Neighbors slid as well, Shawn. Ooh.
Those are both very interesting picks, Ben.
I think I'm Neighbors over Genty straight up. I'll let you comment on that. We got 45 seconds on the clock. What are you thinking?
I have Neighbors very high in the original FFPC redraft rankings that I published a week and a half ago or so for the big gorilla, which is essentially the same contest at the 350 level. Ben, I do think it's going to be easier to get Neighbors. If you weren't Neighbors over Genty, I would have gone with the running back. I think that he's going to have the best workload of any running back in 2025. The setup for every other player Saquon Barkley doesn't have the necessary receiving. Bijan Robinson actually has a very good running back behind him in Tyler Algier. Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, always dealing with David Montgomery. You have Christian McCaffrey there and the injury situation.
We certainly could have went Genty. I'm not.
And I'm getting all of these flashbacks of having watched Russell Wilson play over the last 7 years. You have to go pretty far back before I feel very comfortable with him as a starting quarterback. But Malik Neighbors is something different, right? Malik Neighbors is that guy who, he's going to eventually dethrone Jamar Chase. And when it happens, you want to be in on that. Then we get a Nico Collins somewhat early selection here, which means we've got the full range of choices that we discussed. We expected either Brian Thomas or Amon-Ra St. Brown to go at that pick. Neither of them do. Who do you prefer?
Oh, I think it's tough. And your guy, Devon Achane, who we'll talk about a little bit in a sec, wouldn't be a horrible selection either. Man, Neighbors Thomas as the 2 year 2 teammates is a fun kind of stylistic thing. But you made a good point about the Travis Hunter part. I probably lean Amon-Ra right at this moment, but I'm not entirely swayed either direction. Okay, so you grabbed we were running down close. You grabbed Brian Thomas there. So when
you say the Neighbors Thomas second year thing, I'm like, it's too much fun, right? It's
super fun. Yeah. And things didn't necessarily go to plan with either of our picks here as far as ADP. So just to kind of explain why we were a little bit taken aback there, we picked at the 110 in the other draft. Both Neighbors and Ginty were gone at the 110, which is what happens by ADP. And so we were looking at Puka Nacua or McCaffrey or Trey McBride, who are all guys that went ahead of our pick in this one. We decided to go McBride over Nacua. We really went down to those two, kind of structurally liked the tight end pick. On the way back, we took Achane at the 203 after both Brian Thomas and Amon-Ra went at 201, 202. It went right to ADP, which left us with, you mentioned Nico Collins went a little higher in this room. It left us with Nico as the highest available wide receiver, Derrick Henry and Devon Achane as the other two players available there. By ADP, we went with Achane, a guy you mentioned you've been coming around on and feeling like maybe should be a first rounder, basically. It's just mispriced in the middle of the second round. We took him at 203. So we started McBride, Achane. And then that room, we quickly learned later in the second and early in the third, it's going to be a pretty wide receiver heavy room. We get Chase Brown to come all the way back around to us from an ADP that's about 305 all the way to 310. And so we took another running back. So we started tight end, running back. And then on the way back, Shawn, we took Josh Allen just a little bit ago here today, our fourth pick. Those are the only picks we've made in that other one. But we started a QB, a tight end, and two running backs so far. Really like the pocket of receivers at the 5-6 turn. We'll probably be hitting two in our next turn. And that's something that we are aware of as we plot out this current draft that our listeners are listening to from the 111. That 5-6 turn going to be very interesting. I think the big reason I kind of jumped at Neighbors over Ginty, though, Shawn, is we haven't taken a wide receiver in the other one. I was getting pretty antsy to just draft a wide receiver.
I was doing a little write-up for that. And I was certainly saying that even though we wanted to experiment with some different builds, and we felt like in some situations, running backs were going to be the way to win the race to fill the flex, right? If you end up in 2025, and successful champions of this in the big gorilla level contest have often done this in the past. It's certainly not been impossible in the past either. But the mix of running back talents that you have exposure to this year at the prices that they're going is very compelling for the idea of at least setting yourself up to potentially play a couple of running backs in the flex as well. You and I have talked a lot about, both with each other and then with the listening community, about the benefits of really focusing on your starting lineup in these redraft leagues. That's something we're looking at. We do think that round 5 through round 10, there are a lot of mispriced wide receivers. So it's not necessarily that wide receiver is dramatically deeper in the past, but if the prices, simply if you don't agree with the prices, right? It doesn't mean that you're right or wrong necessarily. But if you don't agree with the prices at receiver, why would you draft a bunch of receivers early merely to make the point that oftentimes that's the way to play it structurally, right? So we think through that element a little bit as well. If we have a lot of receiver targets in rounds 5 through 10, set yourself up to benefit from that. At the same time, I talked about how there were 4 wide receiver starts, even in the draft we were in, certainly in this draft, that I thought were going to be very successful in 2025. So simply going those 4 rounds without taking a receiver was not some massive statement about, oh, we're completely out. Our approach has massively flipped. We don't think you can play wide receiver early in 2025. We obviously still think you can.
Yeah, I mean, the Neighbors Thomas start here shows that as an option as well. But we've talked a lot about in season last year and about the macro and the shifting landscape in the NFL, the lighter defenses, the ways that the sport is changing. The defenses, I think we're very early on that as far as podcasts go. And as far as podcasts go and analysts go, I think we both, Shawn, believe that there are edges to be had. I think it's one of my strongest beliefs at this point in time in 2025 about how to play fantasy football. There are edges to be had in understanding the sport and understanding the macro. The sport is constantly evolving. The way that the sport is being played, the way it's being coached, the way that defenses want to coach, and then the way the offenses are trying to counter that is how you learn what types of offenses you want to make the right probabilistic bets on. It doesn't tell you all the answers, but it gives you the blueprint to actually analyze the different teams and the situations and make the fantasy football picks you want to make. I believe that what we saw last year was a meaningful shift, but drafters are not really treating it like that yet. And so in our first slow, one of the big things we thought was, hey, look, when you're drafting in May, you're trying to do some things that maybe you're not going to be able to do in August. I think that in that draft that we got that opportunity to get Chase Brown all the way at 310, we got a pretty unique build or start to a build at least, that may not be available to everybody come August when running backs start to go a little higher. Chase Brown goes 210 in our draft here, this live draft, by the way. And things are moving quickly. We're almost back up here in the late third. George Kittle still on the board. 2 of the 3 drafters ahead of us have already gone tight end, Bowers and McBride. They may want to go tight end again. The guy right in front of us who went McCaffrey took Henry on the way back. Possibility that we could have a tight end slider. He's going 302, and I would love to get him. There's no
we'll
way.
Take 0 seconds if he's still available.
I think we'll be in lockstep agreement that getting a Kittle share at 311 would be quite fun on this start.
The other player who is a little bit more optimistically priced in FFPC than in some other formats is Jackson Smith and Jigba. He is still available as well. We get James Cook there, so we're 2 picks away. Then we're not as high on JSN this year. Would you? I mean, is he a slam dunk if he comes to us?
It's an interesting question because I do think he's mispriced at 301. And I do think he probably winds up sliding some as some of the running backs come up. Some of the stuff I was talking about may manifest and push some of these guys up. But man, 311 is a pretty good ADP discount on a player that we do like from a talent and long-term profile perspective. I'm just not totally sold on the direction Seattle's headed in. But yeah, big ADP value there to consider him.
Do you
another slider is Breece Hall, but
someone who, and as you say, that Breece Hall does go. So we're gonna be able to pick one of the 2 of them if we want. Kittle does go.
Kittle goes 1 pick ahead of us. Snap picked at the 110 or the 310. We don't get a chance to get him at 311. That does leave JSN as a pretty clear ADP pick. Both of the Kansas City wide receivers are options.
Worthy is an option. Rice went in the middle of the round. Rice is going earlier in main events than in the big gorilla. That's obviously a tiny sample, but the more sophisticated drafters or the drafters willing to shell out more money have been a little bit higher on him.
If we take JSN, I have a hard time pulling up our guy Kenneth Walker on the way back, I guess. Putting 2 picks in the Seahawks. What do you think? I
think if we go JSN, we're probably going to take that QB, which I think would be fun to do again.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. So we take JSN. Josh Allen has already gone. In the other draft, we took Allen after Lamar and Jane Daniels went. Allen does go QB1 on average. Lamar's going 1 pick behind him. Daniels a few picks behind that. You like Lamar and Daniels a little bit more in your initial ranks, and we were looking at Daniels, but he ended up going ahead of us. The drafter at the 111 in our other draft, after we picked at 110, took Terry McLaurin 311, and then Jane Daniels to stack that up coming back. Left us out. The draft on the turn took Lamar as the first QB. Left us Allen coming back. Again, Allen has already been picked here. The draft on the turn here could take either Lamar or Daniels, but we would have an opportunity to add another elite quarterback, something that we should talk about a little bit more, Sean. We talked through quite a bit earlier, and we're feeling like that's a pretty fun thing to be attacking. I'm really coming around on that idea. So Armarian Hampton is the pick here at 312. We start with 3 straight receivers from Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. 3 guys with real draft capital, solid college profiles, solid to amazing. I should say good to amazing. I always nitpick with Brian Thomas a little bit. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Malik Neighbors, just fantastic college profiles, and then early production, particularly coming off good years in 2024. All 3 of them. JSN maybe not the rookie year production we were hoping for, but a good, strong second season going into a third year now. McLaurin does go at the turn again, but it leaves Daniels there for us if that's the unless you want to go Lamar. Either way, I think they both have enormous ceilings.
Well, the only thing I'm thinking here is that Daniels may be easier to get. This is not obviously the way you should play it, but The other thing here is if we take Daniels, we're just completely locking down the national champions from a couple years ago.
Oh, neighbors, Brian Thomas and Daniels, the stack, the LSU stack.
The LSU stack.
I kind of like it. I mean, look, if we're not going to have some fun in May, like why are we drafting on May 31st?
And I do think that Daniels is the one guy from this group where you've even got like that 33 points a game type of upside. Now, I mean, obviously he's much more likely just to do something like 26. And the more realistic ceiling is just in that 28, 29 range. He did average 32 down the stretch last year. He did run more dynamically once he fully recovered from that chest injury. Going to have upgraded weapons. You look at these three guys, and Daniels is the one who could combine immense passing upside with just ridiculous rushing upside. He also has a little bit better playoff schedule than the other two, which really only matters from the perspective of the 3 weeks we care about dramatically more than any others are the last three.
Yeah. New weapons. We don't know how much left Debo has in the tank. They also had Jalen Lane. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about what they were able to do in terms of building out alongside Terry McLaurin, who showed to be a really nice fit, obviously, for the Daniels skill set as a deep threat. A lot of long touchdowns last year, second in the NFL in wide receiver touchdowns or receiving touchdowns last year. They still have Ertz, potential for Ben Sinnott to maybe take a little bit of a step going forward, although they re-signed the other tight end, John Bates, to an extension. So they're doing everything they can to not make room for the Ben Sinnott breakout. But definitely, it's not like they added a ton of talent is sort of my point, but definitely some potential for a little bit more out of that group this year. Last year, they had to get a lot out of Olamide Zaccheaus and a couple Noah Brown games in there. And certainly, I think just adding Debo alone should be able to give them a little bit of dynamism, a little bit of after the catch ability that could help pad Jaden's passing numbers, which it's worth noting from a rushing perspective, he was second in yardage in the NFL, even though he didn't run a lot while he had that rib injury, as you mentioned. He was second in yardage at 891. Third was Jalen Hurts at 632. First was Lamar at 915. I mean, he was right there. I've talked a lot over the years about how we don't really think about quarterback mobility and the different tiers of that, I think, well enough sometimes. Now, for Hurts and for Josh Allen, it needs to be said the touchdowns are a huge part of what puts them kind of in those tiers as well. So Hurts had 14 rushing TDs last year. Allen had 12. Lamar and Jane Daniels had 4 for Lamar, just 6 for Jane Daniels. But the gap in yardage there, when you really look at their efficiency, their yards per carry when they do get out into space, and the rushing rate, the scramble rate, Hurts has a lot of rushes, but a lot of them are the sneaks, which is why his yards per carry is significantly lower. He actually led the league in overall rush attempts. Daniels was second by just 2, but had over 250 more yards because his yards per carry is significantly better. It's more scrambles. It's more of these like playmaking opportunities. Daniels was actually higher than Lamar in overall rush attempts. They both played 17 games. Lamar a little bit more efficient, but Daniels, to your point, has that kind of rushing dynamic upside. 891 last year. He's the other guy like Lamar, who every year is a threat to run for 1,000. But Daniels is the other guy that can, I think, almost be projected for 1,000 rushing yards. If you really think that the ribs limited him for that stretch and you project him for a healthy 17 games, the way that he plays and that was one of the big things we talked about last year with him vis-a-vis Anthony Richardson. People thought Richardson, because of his athleticism, was a better runner than he probably is. So much of Richardson's running was actually designed run rate. He wasn't actually a big scramble guy. People love to talk about the sack avoidance. We said that's why he doesn't actually scramble a lot. He gets rid of the ball. He plays quarterback a certain type of way. Daniels takes sacks at a little bit of a higher rate, but had the really high scramble rates all the way back to Arizona State and at LSU. Even when they're really good at LSU, he's a playmaking quarterback type, and that leads to, again, higher scrambles. Scrambles are better than design runs in terms of yards per carry, that kind of stuff, in terms of rushing upside. So just a lot there to take in. But that just adding in what you were, or adding on to what you were saying about Daniels being this other guy who has the potential to really have that elite ceiling, certainly on the rushing side in year 2, has the potential to go to 1,000, maybe 1,100. Maybe those touchdowns for him only at 6 can come up as well. It's possible. And then the passing numbers, that's the real thing that held him back last year from an even bigger scoring season. He wasn't there with Lamar in terms of passing yards and passing TDs. Talent-wise, we saw that he is. I mean, he's an incredible thrower of the football.
And I don't think that in any way, shape, or form you can couch Lamar's passing season last year as fluky. And yet there is still, a decent amount of risk in when you think about just how efficient he was, how explosive they were, the number of long touchdowns, the likelihood that the Commanders actually throw a lot more and throw not with the same level of explosiveness probably, but an efficiency that can somewhat track what Baltimore does, because Jaden Daniels is just a better pure thrower and at a higher volume. So you do have maybe more safety built in with Daniels than you do with Lamar Jackson. I guess I am surprised that Jackson is not going ahead of Allen. I think that people feeling very comfortable that Allen's rushing touchdowns will stay extremely high with the rules staying the same, all of that. I can understand why he's going there. After we made the pick today, Ben, I did even more research, and as I was writing the piece out, and I did uncover a few more things that made me nervous about that pick again. I think it's going to be a really fun pick for that team. For me with Jaden Daniels, the only thing I'm scared about is injury, and that just sort of comes with it on any player that you kind of throw your heart and soul into. I mean, you know that all the players are one play away from being injured.
Daniels had, he did play all 17 games, but he had one game that he left really early, that Carolina game after the long rush. He only had 6 passing yards in that game. And then he also had a week 18 game where he only played 26 offensive snaps, 45% of them. He only threw 12 times in a game that wasn't important to them. He only threw for 38 yards in that one. So really only had 15 games last year. Part of the reason he only threw for 3,568 yards. But we can look at his playoffs as well. That's with all rookies. We know that they're coming on a little bit later. It's going to be true for a rookie as well, a rookie quarterback as well, especially when you talk about how his injury may be impacted in midseason. But early week 1 of a rookie's first ever start, they don't know how good he is. They don't know what they can do with him, etc. Every rookie is building into something typically in their rookie season. Daniels in the regular season of those 15 games threw for 250 yards just 5 times, over 300 just once. In his 3 playoff games, he threw for 250 plus all 3 times. He threw for 299 at the peak in that Detroit game. A little bit of a shootout there, but that would have been the second highest number of the year. The other 2, again, like I said, would have been within the top 7. Top 8. There would have been 8 of his 250-yard games. But if we look to those playoff games to try to get a better grasp of what his like yards per game number could be as a passer, and in those playoff games, by the way, 36, 51, 48 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns combined in all 3 games. So he adds, those elements to the fantasy scoring. The fantasy scoring was there in the postseason. He was a part of the playoff contest puzzle. If you were playing in different playoff contests, you may be needed Jaden Daniels, depending on the type of format you were playing. Had a good playoffs, basically, and continued to build on the really good regular season, the really good, rookie of the year winning regular season, and what we expect to be a really, really strong career. Like you said, the only real concern is injury. Shawn, we're almost back up. What are we looking at here in the 5th? There has not been a lot of wide receivers that have gone off. Your guy Jameson Williams goes there at 509.
Desperately only one. This is Travion.
Only 7. You're hoping Travion makes it to us. Travion Henderson. Yes. I thought you were saying that this pick. I was like, you're trying not to have to take him because you want to take someone else. Okay, he does slide back to us in the 5th. So Travion Henderson, Sean's low-key favorite rookie, basically all offseason. He's been trying to keep himself a little bit tethered. But, I mean, this time last year you were saying Oh, he's already selected him. He wasn't going to let me.
No, I mean, full disclosure, Ben may have to leave at some point. If it's a locked in, I want to save us a few seconds here or there.
That's a good call. I wasn't even thinking about that, but yeah, Henderson's ADP 505. Somebody that we were hoping maybe would come back to us in the 5th, and our other one did already go at like 412 in that one. To get him at 511, huge ADP slider. I was going to say this time last year, Shawn, you were saying Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison. And you were saying that pre-draft, but you were saying that multiple times throughout the offseason. And it was one of those things where it was like Marvin Harrison felt like such a can't miss to so many people. You were one of the few voices that was adamant, and you were confident and adamant about it. It's why I often like to say, I said earlier this offseason on a show that like you were better at this than we would think of as fantasy analysts. As far as people would say you're good for a fantasy analyst. I was like, I think that some NFL team should hire you to figure out how to evaluate rookies, at least offensive rookies, because
at least 75% of the listeners are like, you guys just really doomed Travion Henderson with.
Well, you've been saying Travion over without saying it. I know you've wanted to say Travion over Omari and Hampton pretty much all offseason. I mean, you maybe have said it. You've ranked it that way, I think, at least once. But we spin around the turn here, Shawn.
We have 3 picks we really like for this one. And I guess I just feel like structurally it almost has to be Hawkinson. But, man, it's tough to pass on either Pickens or Judy.
Oh, yeah, the wide receivers. The Hawkinson pick is pretty darn interesting.
But Hawkinson didn't score a touchdown last year. I mean, he is probably undervalued by a full round.
Coming off the ACL, he was much better than you would expect him to be off the ACL, and now he's 2 years. I mean, and it was a late season ACL. He missed most of the regular season. Like playing his first games off of that got back to pretty good speed pretty quick. I feel like, we have a better chance to see in 2025 the 2023 version. I'm pretty into the pick.
And this kind of goes back to the reason that we took Trey McBride over Puka in our slow draft, which is that if you are trying to win the tournament and you think that elite tight end is relevant to that, and Ben, I'm not saying that. So we go back and forth on elite tight end in terms of what it means, right? And my whole thing is just that it means the guy who scores the most points, dominates, and wins the thing for you. I can look back at my 2024 teams, and I mean, I could have nailed more or less every pick on a Dalton Kincaid team. And the ones that nailed every pick other than Kincaid still did well, but they just sort of floundered down the stretch when we really needed it. I mean, obviously Kincaid didn't score ever, but you contrast that with the Brock Bowers teams that made some other mistakes, and those teams all thrived. I mean, it was just virtually impossible to take Brock Bowers and not be where you needed to be. We can be wrong on the individual players, but you do look at the different tight end profiles, and Hawkinson looks like a guy who will probably score like a mid-round 4 tight end, even if he doesn't come back and hit big on touchdowns, even if JJ McCarthy struggles a little bit, even if Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are as good as we think that they are. I mean, Hawkinson is undervalued, and the other options that you have kind of on this side of the board, I mean, you would need a crazy outcome to get impact tight end scoring from any tight end after Hawkinson who's on this side.
Yeah, so Laporta and Kelsey went between our last turn and this turn. Hawkinson comes off there for us at tight end 6. Before we and typically Kelsey is the tight end 6, but he went a little high. Before we will pick again, by ADP, all of Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, Mark Andrews, and David Njoku are expected to go. They may not all go in every room, but if they did all go before we got back up, you're looking at Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland is the next 2. And I mean, I think I can speak for both of us here, Shawn, that those guys feel overvalued relative to being good prospects, but more traditional rookie prospects in maybe not the best, most favorable early career, ceiling scenarios, etc., in part because we're coming off the Brock Bowers year, which was coming off the Sam Laporta rookie year. And people are just like, oh, yeah, no, it doesn't matter anymore at all. But the rookie tight end thing was such a thing for years that people didn't even want to draft Brock Bowers in this range last year in round 8. And I mean, that seemed absolutely nuts. I mean, not in tight end premium. He was going, more like round 5 in tight end premium. But we took him in basically round 5, round 6 of all of the mains, because even that felt a little bit obscene. Getting Warren and Loveland in the early part of the 8th round this year does feel like it's being pulled up by, the trends of the last couple of years that some young tight ends have produced. After that, it's Tucker Kraft. I kind of like Tucker Kraft. He's on the other side of the board. Dalton Kincaid, Jake Ferguson. You get Kyle Pitts at tight end 16. Don't know that I want to go down that road again. Dallas Goedert. I mean, there's like, who are the tight ends? Who there that I'm mentioning is going to compete with the very best tight ends at the prices you have to pay. I mean, of all those names I just mentioned through Dallas Goedert, that's the end of the 10th round. Like those names are all off the board by the end of the 10th. Isaiah Likely and Pat Freiermuth in the 11th. Brenton Strange at 1201, who I know some people are really excited about. Brenton Strange, his prospect profile, not incredible. A new coaching staff. There's a lot of reasons to be a little bit wary of that. Even that, I mean, you have to pay 11, 12 prices. Like, that's still a meaningful, it starts to be where things start to flatten out, but it's a meaningful opportunity cost. The tight end position in tight end premium especially is not an easy one to attack. So to get Hawkinson there at 602, even at the expense of some wide receivers we really like, on a build where we went receiver to start, it does feel nice. Sean, in our slow, we were talking a little bit about this, but one of the things, again, when you're drafting early, you're trying to think, what can we get that we may not be able to get late? What are some things that we would want to prioritize that are going to hold value over the summer? Those kinds of things. I was pretty big in favor of that, of our start, and the other one where we got both a QB and a tight end in the first 4 picks, in part because, I mean, the early QB thing, if you've watched the sprint and you've watched the results over the last few years, those early QBs in this, last half decade where we've gotten a number of elite dual threat names, they're up there. The teams that are at the top typically have one of those QBs, not only those guys, but there's enough really high scoring QBs, and it's a 3-week sprint that, like, those guys are all going to score really well. The best one is going to score well over 3 straight games in a way that's tough to match. It's not just you can stream late round quarterbacks, but can you get the Baker Mayfield or whoever the late round hit is this year to have 3 consecutive really good games on par with whatever the best of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, or Jalen Hurts can give you? That's tricky. And so I think that's manifested a little bit. That's why we're kind of into that. But the other part of it is, look, we think we're going to get good values here in May. We're going to analyze the board pretty well in the other single-digit rounds, where we're going to be able to have a combination of running backs and receivers that we may not be able to get access to in August. So locking in or giving up maybe some ADP value or whatever, locking in elite onesies, the potential for elite onesies at least. And then if you do draft well with the early draft element, I mean, you're not guaranteed to draft well, but that's the idea. It is a recipe, especially now, for building a really strong team. So I really like that we got that going here again with Daniels and Hawkinson. Got those 2 locked up. If Henderson at 5'11" proves to be a huge value later down the road, or really just some of the other picks, I don't know that the neighbors Thomas, Jackson Smith, and Jigba start's going to be crazy. I mean, the JSN I mentioned did go quite a bit later, but than he has been going. But if we're able to get some other picks that we feel are going to be risers, there's some opportunity to build a team that come August we look back on and we're like, man, this is a really, really good team. And I'll be glad that we didn't do late round at the onesie positions, with that type of a build. We are back up. I have filibustered us all the way back onto the clock. Evan Ingram, Andrews, and Jonnu did go. And
we were
Joku
saved from having to kind of parse the Jonnu Smith trade discussions.
Yeah.
1 pick.
I think I'm into the rookie running backs that you're into for this build right now, or unless there's a pick I'm missing. What are you thinking?
I don't think so. I mean, selecting Jaden Reed really early would have been interesting, but he
already went
selected really early by someone else. which, I mean, not really early compared to where he should be going, but early compared to ADP. I was kind of thinking in this room that Reed is, was not going to come back to it. I mean, by ADP, he wouldn't come back to us in 9 anyway, but he has an ADP in the middle of 9. And so you're thinking certainly, plausible. I mean, JSN dropped more than that early, where you would expect it to happen maybe a little bit less frequently. Then I put the pick in here for Cam Skattebo. His production profile is insane. He's not considered to be a big-time athlete or big playmaker, but he jumped 39 inches at the combine. I mean, this is a guy who, I mean, probably the gap between him and RJ Harvey shouldn't be what it is. I mean, Harvey has caught fire recently in a way that just seems absolutely insane. I think Skattebo, even for someone who's been trying to get him in every draft, maybe I'm just mostly frustrated by that. Anyway, we need to talk about it. We come back around here. The player you picked as this year's Bucky Irving, and the player I feel pretty similar about for that is Bashal Tutin. Back-to-back rookie big swings.
Yeah, I think we hit them both. Then we have Henderson, Skattebo, and Bashal Tutin as our 3 running back picks so far. The thematic element continues. We got 3 rookie running backs. We got the LSU double stack with the QB and receivers. I mentioned the 3 receivers are stylistically similar as well. All recent first-round picks and young guys. JSN a year older, obviously, but Neighbors Thomas, year 2 guys. JSN, year 3 guy. In all cases, coming off their best year. Obviously, JSN had kind of a throwaway rookie year, so I kind of think of them all as stylistically similar. They've risen in this past year to what may be their highest ADP, or maybe they'll continue to rise. You're kind of making that determination. Are they this good? Are they, does Brian Thomas belong here? Does JSN belong here? I think we agree Neighbors definitely does. Anyway, there's similar picks in that regard. This is a fun team that's following certain patterns, I'll say.
And when we look at some of these guys that we just drafted, Ben, this week I should have an article out. It's basically written, so if it's not out, it's because I, for whatever reason, didn't put the finishing touches on. But I'm looking at how I think ADP is going to move for basically every player. Now, that's guaranteed for me to be wrong on a decent number of them. But the idea is I'm trying to think through what the movement could be so that there are things that we need to exploit in our drafts early. We can at least try to do that, knowing you're not going to be 100% correct. When you work through that exercise for Tutin, I think he's someone who could slide in the short term. When it's not obvious, really the only major wart for him as a collegiate runner is this fumbling issue, and they made a point that he fumbled in their OTAs or whatnot. It's going to look congested early. And people are going to wonder, how can you take the RB3 for the Jaguars at this level? I think that he falls, but then eventually he rises, either because they get rid of Travis Etienne, or it just becomes clear that the team selected Tutin for a reason and doesn't really like the incumbents. If they don't like Etienne, and there have been reports that they don't, maybe if they see the real Etienne in practice, they will change their mind on that. Sometimes guys get healthy in a way. One of the things is that before the hamstring strain last year, Etienne was more or less fine. Then he came back, and it was similar to the situation with Isaiah Pacheco, different injuries, but they came back wrong, played through it, and played very, very poorly, right? If he's healthy now, you maybe look at him and suddenly they're like, well, why are we so excited about this early day 3 rookie pick when we have one of the best running backs in the NFL? Most of the breadcrumbs don't suggest that's the way it's going to go. Take Bigsby, not a big talent. We've talked about before how almost all of his production in terms of the peripherals that make it look like, oh, if you had just played him more last year, things would have been great, come from that one game where Indianapolis just refused to tackle him. From that point on, he was actually very poor last year. And that's, most of the season, and certainly the trailing end of the season. His pre-contact ability, similar to Rachaad White, very poor. This isn't the kind of guy that you would think would take that sort of Bucky mantle. Bucky's such a unique guy. We don't necessarily want to compare players to him, but Tootin offers a lot of the same things, but with breathtaking speed. Again, I just think that the situation for both of these guys, maybe there are opportunities in July to take them less expensively to build a more powerful team. I think they're going to be more expensive than this the last week of August.
I think the interesting thing with Tootin is to think about him versus Tank Bigsby. I think I've said this throughout, people think of Bigsby's year as better last year than it probably was. I think he took Travis Etienne's job. Probably Etienne was just hurt. We've talked about Bigsby's. Some of his peripherals look okay. A lot of that came from the one Colts game where they just like couldn't tackle him. He broke like 1 million tackles. Didn't basically have any receiving role. Didn't have I mean, he was good as a rusher, but basically was just like a early down kind of runner. And then Etienne was, again, banged up, not healthy throughout most of the year. You go out and you make the Tootin pick for a dynamic back like this. I just think your secondary back, and you talked about it being a three-way thing. I guess I think it's going to be a two-way thing reasonably quickly, and that Tank Bigsby is going to get displaced. And if Etienne, for any reason, is not healthy, that it's not hard for Tootin to displace Bigsby in that case as well as the main guy. Maybe Bigsby, factors in. There was some talk of like an Etienne trade or something. If something like that occurs, I really like new, the narrative on Tootin, which is new coaching staff, new regime comes in, likes Bashal Tootin. The new GM, James Gladstone, referenced him as a player they could get on day 3 in his interviews as he was trying to get the job. He was talking about the 2025 class, and then they took him on like the second pick of day 3. Like he's like, yeah, I mean, we're on day 3 technically. It's the 4th round. I know I told you guys we could get this kind of player on day 3, but we've waited long enough for me to not look like I don't understand value, and now I'm going to draft him as early as possible here on day 3. They like this player, this new regime. I don't think Tank Bigsby does much of anything other than what some like fantasy people remember being somewhat vaguely interesting for fantasy scoring. There's a lot of teams, a lot of new regimes, coaches take over and stuff. They look at a running back like Tank Bigsby and he's nothing to them in terms of what they're thinking of how they want to build their team. Not to like be too critical of the player, but I just want to really drive that home that I think there's a lot of fragility with the Bigsby, any kind of Bigsby thesis is basically what I'm saying, because he had a questionable profile, a really poor rookie year. And then just like, there's some stuff you get excited about if you want to in the second year stuff. But if you think about it from the perspective that like, they're probably not looking at the same numbers we are, there's a lot of reasons to just be like, he's not that interesting, which again, you bring in Tootin, you pick him, you're going to proactively use him. I really, really strongly believe that. And then, if you're thinking about it from that perspective, it's not so much of a three-way. It's a two-way with Etienne, who's banged up last year, is getting older. I do think Etienne is somewhat intriguing as well. Back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons before an injury-plagued season last year. He's not ancient or anything, but there's some conversation that they may not like him. He may be a trade candidate, et cetera, right? I mean, Tootin and the Cohen offense for the Bucs last year generated a ton of high-value touches. I do think Baker Mayfield was part of that, but a lot of it was just like quick swing passes. I think with the receivers they have, this is one of the things the Bucs did. They would run these downfield routes in a way that were attacking secondaries and then swing the running back out around underneath it and get the ball out there quick. And you can see Rachaad White catch a swing pass and have so much green space. That's not going to be a Bigsby play. It might be an Etienne play early. Late in the season, that's a Tootin play, man. That's what Tootin's going to be able to do with some of those swing passes, get into space, etc. The high value touches. It just seems so exciting with the explosiveness. So anyway, we're almost back up. We are back up. This draft's moving, Shawn.
It is moving. Jordan Mason falls to this pick, which I think is the only fly in the ointment from, that would interfere with our plan of grabbing 2 receivers here.
I mean, I'm very open to that. 903 ADP falls all the way to 911. This is a draft that, I mean, I like Mason. I like his setup. I like the Vikings just behind Aaron Jones, who's pretty old. This is a draft that we've kind of been later running back, started with 3 receivers. We don't have to hammer the rookie receivers necessarily, but I'll go either way. What do you like here? Okay, we go Mason there. The rookie receivers we're talking about are going to be Jaden Higgins and Luther Burden for the most part. Josh Downs, another one we really like here. I like Downs more like in our other build at the 9-10 turn where we didn't get any early receivers because you know that the routes are really going to be there from the beginning of the year. It's mostly just a matter of, can they throw enough as a team and is it accurate enough and all that. But Downs is good and he's going to be startable, basically, is my point. On this build where we have the 3 early receivers, I'd still take him, but we don't necessarily need to throw him into the starting lineup. And when you're thinking about it from that perspective, I kind of like maybe bigger home run swings with Higgins or Burden. I don't know. What does that track for you?
Yeah, I could see that. I think for me, it mostly just comes down to what we see as the different scenarios with the Colts. At this price, I mean, you almost don't even need to have anything go right because he's just so discounted from his volume and talent profile. It also seems like a situation where the 2 things that couldn't really happen here is that Richardson plays enough better that he's not so destructive to the receivers, or Daniel Jones plays. And then you're talking about like the Wan'Dale Robinson massive reception numbers, but probably with, more dynamism. Yeah. And so then, I mean, you're just destroying ADP. But then I really like Jaden Higgins and Luther Burden.
Let's do Downs. It sounds like you're leaning Downs. I really like Downs. I felt like you might want to go with the rookie receivers. I know you really like Higgins and Burden. I don't have any, me, I don't do quite as much rookie digging as you, so I don't have as much affinity. I watched a lot of Downs last year. That guy's good. I know he's good at football, so you don't got to tell me twice to draft him. I'm pretty stoked about, the rookie stuff. They can transition poorly, what have you. I do think, watching Higgins tape, I mean, I've watched these guys a little. Higgins is a fun guy to watch because I think he's really good at playing the ball in the air. I think those guys are always really fun. He's got good hands, different types of, back shoulders, different things. He brings in a lot of different types of targets, but obviously will be working behind Nico Collins. You have, some veterans there like Christian Kirk and Dalton Schultz. You have his college teammate, Jalen Noel, also drafted there. His path to a huge ceiling is maybe a little bit blocked. Burden, we've talked about, interesting profile. Be curious to see how things shake out for him, but probably too big of a gap between Adunze at 703 and Burden still being there in the 10th round here when, again, new regime comes in and probably has plans for Burden. They go out and draft him. Adunze coming off a rough rookie season. So both of those rookies would have been fine picks. What's that?
I have them ranked right together, Adunze and Burden. I think you almost have to play this through Burden simply because, I mean, not that you want to blow your round 10 pick, right? These picks need to have a decent chance of hitting for you, but you've really mitigated the risk that things go wrong in Chicago when you select him. To me, DJ Moore and Adunze, I mean, they're so good. I mean, DJ Moore is so good, and Adunze has so much breakout upside that I still think those are fine picks. But I mean, Luther Burden could be the guy really early, and if he hits from here, you have more benefit as opposed to having less risk. Even though ADP wouldn't suggest it, it does seem like there is at least a slight chance that one of them might slide all the way back around to us, and or that we'll be able to take them in some drafts where we have different draft slots than we do today.
Yeah, I think you're right there. It would probably have to be Burden. Doubt Higgins would come. Yeah, Higgins goes there at 10:09. His ADP is 10:04. Probably not likely to come all around to the end of 11. Burden's going 11:01 and is a little bit more of the type of prospect where you could get in a room and everyone just doesn't really like him because of some of the red flags and some of that stuff. They don't want to take him. They don't believe in it. Higgins is a little more straightforward. Rookie bet, a little bit better draft capital. I mean, not massively better, but yeah. So Shawn, through 10 rounds, we have Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jaden Daniels, Travion Henderson, TJ Hawkinson, Cam Scattaboo, Bashal Tootin, Jordan Mason, Josh Downs there at the 9-10 turn would have been a pocket of wide receivers. Typically, you mentioned Mason as an ADP slider that was interesting. The other guy that is interesting to me there that we've talked a little bit about certainly is Jaden Blue. He goes at the 9-10 turn to the drafter in the 112. Didn't feel the need. That's right at his ADP. Didn't feel the need to push him. I think he's fine value there. Not somebody that got to go out of your way to get necessarily. This is a good build so far, though. We got a quarterback. We got a tight end. We're going to probably take more. 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers. Pretty balanced through 10 rounds.
So then our next question is kind of the reason that you would not take the QB, the elite QB at this time of the year. And you explained why we think that it might be tougher later, which is certainly an opinion I share. Right now, this 11-12 range, though, basically the entire 2 rounds they just don't have anybody who appeals to me personally to where I more or less want to make sure we're already stockpiling all of those rookie running backs in case they have. You could say if you're going to take them this early, then you're not really fending off a price change later, but it does set you up to get all of them, as opposed to if you wait, then you have a bunch of guys in 13 and 14 you want, but you can only make 1 pick in each of those rounds. Are you seeing other possibilities that we would need to really strongly consider as opposed to elevating these guys very substantially as it relates to ADP?
I'm not really. Just to go through the ADP, it's the tight ends that I was talking about. Mason Taylor just went. Hunter Henry just went a couple rounds ahead of ADP for both of those guys. Mason Taylor significantly ahead of ADP, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, his ADP is... Oh, no, he's in the 12th round. So still 2 rounds ahead of ADP, but Henry's actually behind him in the 13th round. But they both go 2 rounds ahead. But the 9th and 10th, 10th and 11th coming back our way is some of those tight ends I was talking about early that are still on the board here. And then there's a lot of receivers that you feel like you're getting into the veteran receiver that you don't love behind the wide receiver cliff type of profile or wide receiver window, if you will. So Darnell Mooney just goes off the board here. Keon Coleman's here as a year 2 guy that's going to probably run a lot of routes, but didn't have a year 1 profile that I think you can already kind of think of him as outside the wide receiver window, in my opinion. You get some rookie profiles that are coming off as well, that like Kyle Williams and Trey Harris both just went off. Burden has not, so he's still there. Hollywood Brown in the next round, I guess, is mildly intriguing to me on a team where we didn't take either of the other KC wide receivers in trying to find someone, Sean. Christian Kirk, Rashid Shaheed, Marvin Mims, I'm not really that into either. It's a lot of names that I'm trying to point out I'm not that into. And there's a lot of quarterbacks that go in this range as well. Justin Fields, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, all from 11 through 13. So as far as, what are we leapfrogging? We're leapfrogging a lot of picks that, no, we probably don't want to take. Jack Besh is also in there, another rookie profile we don't necessarily love. It's outside the wide receiver window. It's, Burden does go there a few picks before we are able to be on the clock. It's outside the wide receiver window, or it feels that way. You have some of the veteran, like RB2s, like Rashad White is in this range, Tank Bigsby's in this range, Tyler Algier, Austin Eckler's in this range, Tyjae Spears is in this range. Way at the end of round 13, you have Roshan Johnson. Like, it's a whole group of like guys that are probably not that dynamic. Let's just swing at the. Also in this range is guys like Jarquez Hunter, who I know you're referring to. He's at 1304. I'd take him at 1111. I have no issue with that.
So the disappointing thing here is that there were 3 pretty good picks that did go in the last 3 picks right before us, in Luther Burden, Isaiah Likely, and Michael Pittman. I think that Likely was even like a vaguely interesting choice at the previous pick. I would have, made the case for, taking our second tight end if he had made it a couple more spots. That's disappointing. I think that does kind of push us then to, taking one of those runners.
We did grab Hunter there. They're, to me, both in the 13th round. I was just kind of questioning what you were seeing there.
Yeah, no, it just different depending on what contest you're focusing on and what time window. You're getting slightly different ones. It looked like maybe Samson was higher in the queue, but I may have been looking at it wrong. So I mentioned that when we made our picks on the pod a couple of weeks ago for the 2025 Bucky Irving, you picked Tootin, I picked Jarquez Hunter. We've drafted them both, so we're off to a pretty good start.
Yeah. He's a guy I know you really like, and I wanted to secure there. Is there anyone else that you're looking at? Or should we just grab Samson as well here?
I think it's Samson.
Yeah.
I think he could be, he probably isn't a riser until the very end, but even though I have been a pretty big Quinshon Judkins supporter, and I'm not overly concerned about the poor efficiency, in part because he's got that immense early production. He's got the big time size athleticism combo, and he had much better peripherals in 2023. So you have the freshman season electric, the second season better peripherals, I think, than people realize, even though his yards per carry numbers do throw up a red flag. And then obviously last year, really pretty underwhelming as he splits with Travion Henderson. But when you are looking at these guys who are backups, the players who were just added, so really any of the rookies, but then the players who are just added who don't have a Bijan Robinson or a Jonathan Taylor ahead of them, I do think it's meaningfully different for Samson versus, say, DJ Giddens, that Jonathan Taylor, even if he's had some down time periods, has established himself as just a clear-cut superstar at the NFL level, and then he had a good end to the season. Judkins hasn't. We would expect someone with his prospect profile to come through and be good, but there's at least that little bit of an opening for the two of them to be on the field and Samson to just actually look better, or for them to look similar enough that I guess maybe they destroy each other's value. I'm pretty optimistic actually about Cleveland fielding a competent offense. I don't care which one of the four QBs starts. Really, I mean, if Flacco or if Sanders ends up being the guy a lot of people want him to be, that's great. If Dylan Gabriel is able to see over the line and just executes the way he did all through college, and that's the only thing that would concern me is if
Gabriel hits a growth spurt.
Yeah, so maybe we're not going to get that. The only thing that would take me off of these Cleveland Browns players would be Deshaun Watson as the starting QB, which we just don't have to worry about, right? Samson is someone who just in so many classes would have been the RB2, the RB3, the RB4. People would be, doing the type of reach to get him that we just did for Scottaboo and Tootin. And even with their pick of Judkins, I mean, they went super early back for Samson. Samson is a big time guy. Both of these guys, in Hunter and Samson, have fantastic profiles. And in redraft, you can afford to be a little bit patient. If these guys are pure holes in the first month of the season, I mean, that's not the best case scenario for us by any stretch. That's not nearly as damaging as it would be in best ball.
I love those notes on Samson. I think you just really kind of swayed me on him. I was maybe a little bit skeptical, but this point that it's a really good profile in a really good class that we want to have exposure to, and just because he was the second rookie taken in the same class, I mean, when you're comping it to other rookies coming in behind superstars, I mean, Quinshon Judkins should not be immediately granted, like you said, Jonathan Taylor status, which is what Giddens is working behind. We just took him at 1202. Like when we're in the 11-12 range, we're taking rookies in uncertain situations and unstable situations that we can potentially see some of the, shakeups that happen work in their favor. And I mean, clearly that's possible. And I think it's just a little bit of a trick, at least for me mentally, that just because there's another rookie that they really liked and they took in the, top part of the second round ahead of Travion Henderson. I mean, obviously they love Judkins. They're going to play him. They want to play him. Like it's clear from the draft capital they gave him that they're into him. But just because of that doesn't mean that Dylan Sampson is not a desirable target in the 12th round. I think that was a really well argued point. The other name in this range, or names, as you were alluding to, if you don't take the elite quarterback, you can go quarterback in these ranges. Since our last pick, I mean, Kyler and Caleb Williams went before our pick. Since our last pick, Dak, Justin Fields, and Brock Purdy have all gone. The other thing I keep, or maybe I'm not thinking about enough or forgetting a little bit is when you get into redraft, versus best ball, you do start to see quarterbacks slide because people just need the one and they don't worry about taking another and start to get some pretty big fallers sometimes. Drake May is my favorite quarterback in this range. He's at the 1206. We're into the 13th now. We got a lot of picks that we want to make to build out this team. We already have Jaden Daniels. We don't even necessarily want to carry a second QB. It gets to be a little bit of an issue on the build. But May's another one that in this range I would have been definitely content taking a guy at the 11-12 turn that would have made a lot of sense. And if there's a possibility that he slides all the way back in the 13th, is that something you would consider right now, a second quarterback?
I don't think that appeals to me very much once we've taken Daniels. I do think, and I think as you pointed out, that was the point I was starting to make and then I think got distracted. We don't get Xavier Worthy, a player I have ranked extremely high, with the Daniels pick. And then we take two guys who certainly we're not viewing them as pure lottery tickets, but you do need some things to fall into place, and you probably don't get immediate production. If you don't take Daniels and you use those picks at QB, you can take both Fields and May right there, where you're getting this combination of second-year breakout for May with hybrid ability for both of them. You end up with a safer team, too, in that you're now not worried as much about the one QB that you've spent so much on getting injured.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you on that. We'll get exposure to Drake May. I don't necessarily want to be drafting him at the 13-14 on this particular build. There's a reason those guys tend to slide. But speaking of not getting either Xavier Worthy or Rashee Rice, a guy that I know you're not going to be thrilled about considering, Hollywood Brown is still chilling.
Ben, when I did my original top 200, I had him out entirely, and I only kind of moved him back in because he had an ADP of like 130.
He's about to turn 28 in June, Sean. He's not like – he got hurt last year. He played for Arizona the years prior.
He's been down for so long.
Kyler's –
I just don't – I mean, now, again, it's coming off of the injury, but they couldn't get anything to him in the playoffs when they desperately needed him.
That's a good point. The playoffs were not a good stretch for him.
I mean, I really wanted him last year. I thought last year it was pretty exciting. It didn't happen. Sometimes you hold on too long. Sometimes you let go too early. Maybe I'm letting go of that one too early. He did get picked. So
yeah,
the name here that I think actually could be in for a secondary breakout, a fifth-year breakout, a weird breakout, because people who have read, I haven't written it for a couple of years now, but I've read the fifth-year wide receiver breakout articles that I used to put up every season, know that those breakouts do not come from first-round picks who have already had their chances.
Yep, they're late-round guys.
I do think that Rashad Bateman is really weirdly priced when you consider the run he went on at the end of last season and the possibility that he could take another step. Having said that, I mean, my strong preference is still just to grab Brashard Smith and J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, we should take Brashard Smith first, whose ADP is a little higher than Bateman's at 1402. We're here at 1311 at the 13-14 turn. For reference, Dylan Sampson's ADP is 1311. We took him at 1212 to get him on the team, as you were talking about, making sure we got all these rookie running backs. Smith is a lot closer to price, and because we, again, didn't make a dive into the KC offense earlier with those receivers at the 3-4 turn. Again, it's like that's why I was talking with the Hollywood Brown thing. I like getting some exposure to the Chiefs one way or another. Brashard Smith is a really interesting profile you've talked a lot about. Yes, he's only a 7th round ADP, but he can make noise in camp in a way that would be pretty exciting going into the year. He could be nothing, but 13-11 in a main event. You take these scratch offs, you can cut players, you're going to make bids. It's not a it's not a thing that we're tied down to for the rest of the year. We are probably going to hold him for a while, presumably, and see if something pans out. Swings back around to us. You're into Bateman. I'm pretty okay with it. I don't see anything. There's no tight end.
Don't you think J.K. Dobbins jumps like 4 rounds when he signs? You're like, no.
I don't think he jumps 4 rounds. He's in the 14th. I think he jumps to the 10th. But maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I share your enthusiasm on Dobbins. We haven't talked about our late game strategy yet, but I know you mentioned him in some of our conversations. But let's take him though. I actually like the bet. Now that you've kind of convinced me on it.
I almost like Bateman there. You got it right back though.
Yeah, well, Bateman is probably just another veteran outside the wide receiver window, roster clogger type. Even though you made a case that he could be a late career breakout. But if Dobbins signs in the right place, I know we talked a little bit about this. I think you're the one who told me or somebody else told me or something. But his contract has a clause that after a certain date, I think you were telling me this, that he can only negotiate with the Chargers or something to that effect. Is that right?
Well, they've put a tag on him in order to help themselves with the compensatory formula that if enough time does pass, then they're going to either again have exclusive rights or just, it dramatically limits his options. He is going to sign, he is going to jump. And at least one of the reports, which I'm certainly not saying go out and take this super seriously, but that there may be some discussions in Chicago where there's a bit of a debate on whether they should sign Dobbins or they should sign Chubb. I just think either guy would probably be the starter. And then you're talking about, or, if you really like DeAndre Swift, and I don't think they do. This is the coaching staff or the head coach who was the offensive coordinator when he's like, get this guy out of here so he can play Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, which again, if you have Jahmyr Gibbs, then that's a different story. But you're talking about Dobbins being a guy who, again, one of the things that we threw on one of the pods, Ben, I'm not sure if it was early enough or noteworthy enough for people to really grab onto it, but Dobbins had one of the best profiles, the best set of results against heavy boxes of any back in the NFL last year, and included evasiveness and explosiveness for a guy who clearly can't make the long run in the same way he used to. But J.K. Dobbins, what he did last year, it's weird to me that he's not on a team, because I think he reestablished himself as a very clear-cut starter, if not an above-average NFL running back.
The evasiveness was really good. The long speed was at times disappointing. He's 26, turned 27 in December. It'll be interesting. He did miss a little time as well for people who were worried about the ability to stay healthy. He didn't actually give you the full 17 games. He did get 13 games and did get career-high 905 rushing yards, over 1,000 total yards, 9 touchdowns. a good year. A good year for Dobbins. Certainly distanced himself from the other backs with the Chargers last year. It looked much better than Gus Edwards or Kamani Vidal or any of the other guys they had there. Yeah, I was thinking about Swift recently, and that's your 2025 running back dead zone poster boy. But if Dobbins lands there, then it won't. He'll obviously lose all his value right away anyway. But that's the guy that earlier in the offseason, everyone wanted to talk themselves out of because they said the new coach doesn't like him, like you were mentioning, from their time together in Detroit and all this stuff. And then now, because of a lack of other options, which is like the biggest whenever people ask me about the dead zone, because I've written about it a lot, I mean, I think the biggest marker for it is when people talk themselves into players just because of a lack of other options and not because of the player himself, really, is like one of the best telling points. It's like, oh, well, there's going to be touches there for him. And there's probably not. Actually, you didn't really like the player. If you really like the player and there's touches, then he's going in the third round. He's going ahead of the dead zone or even higher. So Swift is floating he goes in the 704 here. He's floating in a little bit of the deeper part of the traditional dead zone, 702 on average. That 6-7 turn. Definitely a dead zone period traditionally. As a veteran coming off a somewhat disappointing year, and people are starting to talk themselves into it because he hasn't been displaced yet, even though there was reason to believe that he has. I've seen some people on Twitter post some stuff that's like, DeAndre Swift's that guy that you're missing out on. And I'm just like, that's the dead zone call is coming, Sean.
So Drake May does go
14-10. Yeah.
Pretty good value, as you can see. As you draft this time of year in main events, you are especially getting, I think, drafters who kind of understand the full situation. So not a surprise that the QBs would be falling.
We're hoping for DJ Giddens to come all the way back to 15-11, right? Just keep taking rookie running backs?
Just keep taking them.
We already have 5 on the roster. We only have 4 receivers total. We have 5 rookies on screen, but we also have Travion Henderson off screen. So I lied. 6 rookie running backs on the roster. I already have 8 running backs total. Travion Henderson, Cam Scattaboo, Bashal Tootin, Jordan Mason, Jarquez Hunter, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, J.K. Dobbins. That's 8 running backs, and 2 of them have played an NFL snap. Jordan Mason and J.K. Dobbins. The other 6, all rookies. Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Josh Downs are our 4 receivers. Feel really good about that. Feel actually fantastic about that. 4 very talented players where you feel like it's an asymmetrical bet, right? Like some of them situationally may not be fantastic. The Seahawks might not be good enough for JSN to actually be great. The Colts might not pass enough for Josh Downs to be great. Although, as you mentioned, at this price, we've talked about it recently on some shows. It's pretty absurd. And you talked about Pittman almost made it all the way back. I had missed that, but he was a pretty big faller. He went at 11-10 here against an ADP of 10.08. Almost made it all the way back to us at 11-11. We could have taken both the Colts receivers on this build, but love those 4 receivers. You got Daniels, you got Hawkinson. 15-16 here, Sean, is where I feel like it's time to dip into the rookie tight end. We in tight end premium, you want to get some tight end depth. We were talking about a hope and a plan to get that through some exciting rookies, right?
We were. And this is the range where we would be wanting to target Terrence Ferguson to make sure he doesn't land somewhere else. We'll go ahead and put his name in the box on that one. Ferguson, someone who had receiving production across a number of seasons in college, did that despite some injuries that limited him. He went out and tested extremely well at the combine. I talked about the Rams finding their George Kittle with him. He's really not an athlete to that level, in part just because George Kittle is a freakish athlete. But you're talking about a guy here who immediately will become one of the NFL's most athletic tight ends. You know, maybe this pick just ends up being one that we swap out early because you're just like, you've got to move some players for immediate production. But he's also a guy who could jump 5 rounds if he has a good offseason.
So we're back up. Giddens is still there, but I mean, after talking through all the running backs we have, I honestly don't feel like we need to go there. You have mentioned Keenan Allen to me. He's still there, similar to the J.K. Dobbins pick, could rise. Jalen Royals is at the 17-18, and so is Harold Fannin. Do we want to try to push those 2 to 17-18 or bring one of them all the way up here to early 16?
It might be interesting to go ahead and make the Knoll pick. Is that the one you were mentioning?
No, I said Keenan Allen, Jalen Royals, and Harold Fannin. You want Jalen Knoll?
He is below ADP. Are you on board with that one?
Okay. Sure. I don't think he's going to play a lot this year. I really don't. I'm skeptical of it. So the reason at this moment, okay, I mean, I should walk that back a little bit, but at this moment, the reason that I am saying that is I talked on the last show and some people reached out and were asking some questions about the returner scoring and stuff. We talked about the returner drafts that I was doing. Noel has some really intriguing punt return, like a punt return background, and also has done kick returns. In each of his seasons in college, he had both. I kind of feel like they end up taking him in the late third round after taking Higgins in the early second round. I kind of feel like he's going to play a little bit more on special teams as a rookie, be their returner, because their return game is going to be more important this year. They're changing the touchback rule from the 30 to the 35. Sean, we've talked about how scoring was back last year, largely because of that touchback rule. We expect a lot more kickoffs in play, and that teams are going to, I expect teams are going to want to actually put players back there that can make plays with the ball in their hand. I feel like that's part of what maybe pushed Noel's draft capital up a little bit. The guy that they really liked out of Iowa State was Higgins. That's who they took in the early second round. I feel like Noel, to me, is like, okay, we have a special teams option here, and we have a long-term plan for the Christian Kirk role, but that they're going to want Kirk in the slot. Like they went out and got Kirk. Now, I know you mentioned maybe Kirk's just done, so maybe that is the case, but they're kind of an old school coaching staff. The way that D'Amico Ryans does all that stuff, I kind of feel like it's going to be veteran deference and those things. So particularly in a managed league, I feel like we're going to cut him. Like we were really low at the clock, but I do feel like he's not going to do enough in the first month, and we're going to cut him fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely a strong possibility. And again, we just don't hate that for these picks here, knowing you're almost certainly going to cut someone. I guess I would look at it from the opposite perspective of I've been a little bit lower on Noel from a dynasty perspective, really for the reasons that you just mentioned, which is that I think that there's a very good chance that a year from now, you'll be able to acquire him less expensively, even though he's not in any way prohibitive to acquire currently. However, there is that possibility that he hits immediately. The production from Higgins to Noel is actually very similar, right? And then you look at Noel as this extraordinary athlete. It's a similar kind of bet to the one we made with Samson, where maybe the guy who went second when the team was like, oh no, we already addressed this position, but we think the next guy is so good that we also have to spend a day 2 pick, like the number 79 pick on Noel as well. That becomes pretty interesting there. And I guess I do think that Kirk is washed, which I hope he's not, right? And you want the guys to be able to come back from their various injuries. But he's also not a player who ever had immense upside. And there's a possibility that Jalen Noel is able to do for them what Tank Dell was doing. And I don't think they have that otherwise, right? So to me, it looks like there is a niche for him if he is in fact good, which is the question that he has to answer. But I think if he answers it affirmatively, he's actually going to be really interestingly priced.
Doesn't that niche require Higgins to not be very good?
It does, which is one of the reasons why I like him on a team that we missed Higgins on.
Okay. Yeah, it's similar to your Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins point in that regard. Obviously Higgins isn't a lock to be a star or anything. We know that the rookies can miss, and so from that perspective, sure. I mean, I'm saying it very flippantly, like, oh, we're going to cut him up, yada yada yada. But I'm still very fine with the pick. It's the 16th round in a managed league, and we want to be targeting upside rookies in this range. As you noted, I'm definitely aware. There's people that had Noel ranked ahead of Higgins, right? I'm definitely aware that his profile very comparable and a strong profile. People were high on him. I just am saying that I have this probably too specific read on his situation that the capital's probably being overlooked a little bit, or not overlooked, overemphasized a little bit in the fantasy space as being more the capital is not always specifically about offensive role, was the point of my special team stuff. And so I think sometimes we just compare it like it's all apples to apples. But with Noel, the special team stuff is actually good for his profile. It shows that the team wanted to get the ball in his hands and all these things that go all the way back to like the John Moore days, right? Like it shows that this is a potentially very good player, or it increases the likelihood that he can be a hit at the NFL level as a player. But I think as far as it relates to what the team was doing and looking at the specific situation and all that there's maybe some complexity as far as what it means for, as I said, for the early career playing time. As you were saying, I think the way you put it with the dynasty stuff, that he could be even cheaper next year, is probably the way that I would look at it. Keenan Allen does go. Giddens goes. Yeah, Keenan, you had put on some of our documents that we were talking about, some targets for these later rounds. I think he's definitely going to sign too and probably rises. I mean, he just went at 1701. I mean, once Keenan Allen signs, he's probably going to go in, at least like Quentin Johnston's going in the 14th round with Bateman and Jalen McMillan. Like probably at least in the 14th, that range, I would guess.
I mean, but in terms of like, if this were a best ball team, I mean, it would have been a lock Keenan Allen pick. I'm worried maybe isn't the right way to couch it. I really like Allen. I mean, Allen should have been the pick. But he does feel like a guy who you're going to constantly look at and say, he scores too much to cut. We don't want to start him. We also don't really want to have that conversation of whether or not we're going to start him every week. And so it just removes some headaches if you just don't put him on the
roster clogging thing. But I was worried about the same thing with Rashad Bateman, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I think the guy that I really actually kind of wanted was to just take Giddens and take a 9th running back and be like, I mean, like, what if Taylor, I don't know, gets hurt in the offseason? No one wants that. No one's hoping for that. But then suddenly, Sean, you'd be wanting to take Giddens in like the 4th round, I think. If Taylor was out for the year, you'd be like, oh, yeah, no, DJ Giddens is going to be a star.
People don't like Giddens nearly as much as I do. I looked at his numbers the other day and like the numbers are all there. I watched him play. I mean, you were saying you didn't think he had the long speed and like, I mean, not some of these other guys, because some of the other guys have crazy long speed, but man, that dude's fast too. You know, some people are talking about how he doesn't have great vision. I mean, multiple people who came on OT said, I mean, Giddens doesn't have vision. I'm watching him beat these guys who have him dead to rights. It's like, well, I mean, maybe like somehow setting up a lot of these plays he's not doing on just the vast, majority of touches, which, I mean, the big bulk is more important than the highlights. But man, when he's got a one-on-one with somebody in the secondary, he beats that dude every time.
But back up. Looks like Harold. Take the rookie. Oh, Harold Fannin? Let's take him. Yeah. I was going to say Royals, the rookie receiver that you actually would like. The Jalen that you actually would have liked to pick if you weren't just looking at the fact that Jalen Noel had slid. Because you obviously have Jalen Royals ranked ahead of Jalen Noel, right?
I do.
Yeah. There's no question. So we're just like playing with our food here, hoping Jalen Royals gets to us at 1802 when his ADP is 1710. But I sound like salty about this at this point. It's like these things don't even really matter, honestly, on a May best ball, non-best ball format managed league. Royals does make it back around. Is there another pick I don't want to lock us into Royals we're going to get plenty of exposure to him. Is there another path you were thinking about here?
Well, the other player who should have been gone for a long time is Taj Brooks. I do think Royals fits this team better.
Taj Brooks isn't gone. I'm not following it closely enough. He's got an ADP in the middle of the 15th round, but let's take Royals.
Oh, I'm
looking at an ADP of 1506.
We're going to get Jalen Royals every draft. Let's get Taj Brooks here. Now we've got the Bengals. We got the Bengals backfield locked up. Chase Brown at 310 and Taj Brooks at 1802.
Yeah, in our 2 different drafts, we've taken these 2 guys. Brooks is a really good value at 1802. That's wild. I mean, he should be going in the same range as like Dylan Sampson, Jarquez Hunter, maybe not quite that high. But we took Rashard Smith 1311. We just took Taj Brooks 1802. I mean, Smith's a more intriguing profile that you really liked pre-draft. and then lands with the Chiefs, but it's not 5 rounds of difference in those profiles, right?
No, I think probably not. One of the things that is kind of interesting when you're looking at those guys is that, I mean, both of them rank right there in the same range in the next gen score with Caleb Johnson. They're both well ahead of guys like Jaden Blue and Jarquez Hunter, etc. Now, that doesn't mean that that is in some ways more accurate. There are still holes in how next gen is trying to evaluate prospects, but they do an interesting enough job that I like to sort of check some of my own work when I feel like I'm getting very far off of the consensus on what a guy is, right? Not where he was drafted, because we know that the NFL teams are going to do some interesting things there, and not that because I like it and next gen likes it that it's going to be accurate. Sometimes we may be going down the same hole, making the same mistake, but I guess I pretty strongly believe that those guys, I mean, their production profiles are just very straightforwardly should have been valued more in the draft. They should be valued more by drafters right now. And they're both more athletic, I think, than people give them credit for, in that Smith is so athletic in a straight line that the size becomes a little bit less relevant. And then Brooks has this crazy agility score. You put that with what he's done on the NFL field and his size. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit scared of what he might do to Chase Brown. So we'll see if that's even his role as the clear-cut second back. But a Chase Brown injury, and probably even more so than Smith, because Smith would still have to deal with other guys. You know, Dylan Sampson probably still, I mean, you still have Jerome Ford there, Jarquez Hunter, 3 backs. Now, there are going to be other people on this Cincinnati team, and maybe they're much more relevant than I am suggesting. But Taj Brooks is a guy who's good, and with one injury would be off to the races. And has standalone value, almost certainly.
Yeah. 18 picks down. It doesn't matter if Royals makes it back. We have to take a kicker and a D here. So we are done for the fun picks. Of those 18 picks, would it surprise you if I told you, Shawn, that 10 of them on our team were rookies? 2 were second-year players. Neighbors and Brian Thomas, our first 2 picks. 2 were third-year players, JSN and Josh Downs. So a few of the non-rookies were the first 3 picks that we made. We could have taken Gene T in the first. We thought about it. The only actual veterans are TJ Hawkinson. We took J.K. Dobbins late. Oh, and then Jordan Mason, who's actually only a 4th-year player. Every other player we drafted was a rookie or a second-year player or maybe a 3rd-year guy.
And in some ways that overstates a little bit because we were more veteran heavy early. But yeah, I mean that's honestly the reason we're drafting a main event on May 31st is that we want to get the rookies before maybe they get more expensive.
Yeah. It is. It's a fun team. I mean, yeah, it definitely overstates it. Our first 3 picks were all wide receivers. It overstates it a little in the fact that Jaden Daniels is, one of the second-year guys I referenced. Hawkinson, our 6th-round pick, also not a rookie. Most of these rookies were running backs, which you should be getting into the rookie running back class even later. Even if you're drafting early, if you're drafting late, whatever. The rookie running back class of 2025 is going to take the NFL by storm a little bit. That's the expectation. And it's going to matter for redraft for sure. We know that's a position where rookies, it's not just can they produce. That's usually the question with tight ends or maybe a quarterback. Oh, is the quarterback going to be good enough as a rookie? And running backs, they will. That's their prime. It starts day one, right? Unfortunately, but running backs from a health perspective are kind of always, moving toward the end of their career from day one. I don't want to make any kind of disparaging analogies, but I was thinking of driving a new car off the lot and then it loses value. I mean that's not really fair. But Then there's a lot of running backs who are just studs for a long, long time. I shouldn't say it the way that I am, but we know that as far as how you approach it from fantasy football, and it can be a little bit dehumanizing at times, and that's what I'm trying to acknowledge and apologize for. But
there are listeners who are saying as soon as you guys drove this draft off the lot, your team had lost in value.
There you go. But as far as the fantasy football element of it, it's certainly important to understand that it's all value based, and from a value based perspective, there is traditionally a lot of opportunity with understanding that rookies can be very good at their physical peak and able to handle the rigors of an NFL running back role from day one, and probably undervalued because they haven't shown you how good they are yet. And so there are these, upside uncertainty as an opportunity. There are these plays that you really want to be considering making. Shawn, where are we going defense and kicker? I see you've been playing with the queue here.
We didn't do any research for the kickers, so we may even draft people who aren't on teams. But I do believe Philadelphia plays early, so that would be the kicker play to roster and swap out.
Yeah, let's take him. Yeah, you get the weird week one quirk where there's still drafts going on after the opening games, and so you get kind of a free look. Philadelphia in 2025 plays on the Thursday night game, the kickoff game, as the Super Bowl champions. So we go with Jake Elliott, assuming that he's still their kicker, something that neither of us has actually checked. But feels like a pretty good bet.
So then our defensive choice here.
He's their only kicker.
The Chiefs and the Chargers play early. The Chargers are at home. The Chiefs are coming off of the Super Bowl debacle. You could go that route and then replace it. I have the Cardinals, the Patriots, and the Commanders in the queue because I believe they all have very soft week one opponents.
Cardinals are at the Saints. That's a fun one for sure. Patriots are at home against the Raiders. Who else did you mention?
Commanders.
The Commanders are at home against the Giants. The Vikings and the Bills and stuff are still around. The Bills are at home against the Ravens. We don't want to touch that necessarily. They're supposed to be like a good defense, but they're not really draftable. Arizona's like, I've seen some conversation that they may low-key be like a really good D. They're at the Saints, but the Saints are going to be a disaster, right? I mean, even though it's a road game that you're playing into, they're home against Carolina in week 2. Maybe you just get lucky and they're a good team. They're in San Francisco week 3. We're probably cutting them before week 3, but we're going to go Arizona. They do get the Seahawks, Sam Darnold, on a short week at home in week 4. So if they do have a really good week 1 and week 2, maybe we carry them through the San Fran game and we start them in week 4 on Thursday Night Football. A home game against a short week is Sam Darnold and the Seahawks team that will probably be 0-3 because, no, they're probably not going to be that bad. But I've mentioned I'm a little bit pessimistic about them this year. They get the Titans week 5 as well at home. Another rookie quarterback there, which, I'm assuming week 1 is a rookie quarterback against the Saints. The Cardinals have a nice opening schedule. The Colts in week 6 at Indy, but you're talking about an indoor game against either Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones is a quarterback I'm willing to. If the Cardinals defense is good, other than that Niners game, you can pretty much play them the first 6 weeks and be pretty excited about it.
The Cardinals defense is one as well where they're going to play very hard, similar to the Texans, where every once in a while you feel like it may be a little borderline. If the talent level jumps, the entire team situation jumps, the Cardinals are going to put some pressure on, and we both are very skeptical of the Saints. I mean, it would be a wonderful story if the Saints pick actually works out and they're just dropping these long bombs to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed every week. It'll probably be more of a process than that. in week one, I mean, it's just hard to score on defense. You need those defensive touchdowns. I mean, the Cardinals feel like your best bet for a defensive touchdown in week one.
Definitely week one. I know I was going through their whole schedule. For anyone who wants more of their schedule, week 7, they're playing the Packers. Week 8, they're on a bye. You're going to have to get rid of them. But I'm excited. I'm excited to start week 1 against the Saints. That was a good call. Cardinals. I don't even know if the Panthers in week 2 is going to be that great of a look. The Panthers might be fun, right? I mean, Bryce Young looked good late last year. But I do think Jonathan Gannon's a good coach, and I think their defense, it has more talent this year is what I alluded to hearing. And I think through the draft they added, Walter Nolan was a D tackle in the first round, Will Johnson, a cornerback in the second round, Jordan Birch, a DN in the third, Cody Simon, a linebacker in the fourth, Denzel Burke was a cornerback in the fifth. Their first 5 picks were all defenders. I think they also added a little bit out of free agency. But, yeah, that's a team that they're trying to get better on the defensive side of the ball. We'll see if it happens. Fun draft, Sean. We wound up with Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jaden Daniels, Travion Henderson, TJ Hawkinson, Cameron Scattaboo, Bashal Tootin, Jordan Mason, Josh Downs, Jarquez Hunter, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, J.K. Dobbins, Terrence Ferguson, Jalen Knoll, Harold Fannin, Taj Brooks, Jake Elliott, and the Arizona Cardinals defense. So positionally, Daniels is our only QB. The running backs are just all the rookies, right? Travion Henderson, Scattaboo, Tootin. We grabbed the Mason in there as an ADP value. Jarquez Hunter, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, J.K. Dobbins, who you think will rise after he signs, and then Taj Brooks. Wide receivers, only 5 in the whole draft, and one of them who I've already cut. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Josh Downs, and Jalen Knoll. And then the tight ends were TJ Hawkinson, Terrence Ferguson, and Harold Fannin, and the 2 rookies late that give us a lot of upside potential. Maybe we get some big news out of camp. Those are 2 guys that they weren't the top tight ends in this class necessarily, but have really intriguing profiles, maybe going a little bit overlooked. Were fun 3rd-round picks in dynasty drafts and are fun late-round picks to play into that rookie uncertainty that earlier I was talking about being not so into Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren in redraft in round 8, but I'm not saying it's not possible for a rookie to be good. And certainly those are the better rookie profiles. Ferguson, Fannin, you do it a lot more cheaply. You play into that uncertainty a little bit. It's a fun tandem behind Hawkinson. Hopefully we wind up with, 1 hit there and you have 2 really good tight ends. That would be pretty fantastic.
It would. I'm probably just much too optimistic for those guys, but I do think that if you roster them a decent amount late, then, if one of them hits, you've just changed all of your teams, right? And it's that ability to, with one fell swoop, just rewritten an entire swath of your portfolio. And again, you contrast those guys to some of the other players who are going. And again, it gets down to personal preference in late rounds. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the players other teams are selecting are bad. They're just not our preference. The other player who's kind of our preference there, Jalen Royals, doesn't go at all. And so it'll be interesting to see how much I'm begging Ben to bid on him in the first free agent period, where I'm sure he's going to wonder why we didn't just draft him. Anything you do different or weaknesses on this team? We both talked about how we weren't as over the moon about the JSN selection as the Travion Henderson selection, but certainly you get 2 big ADP values even early, right? One of the reasons we weren't as high on JSN is we're not sure that's actually going to stay as an ADP value. I would be surprised if Henderson doesn't, although, if it's a clear, it's not going to ever be clear. That's one of the reasons why running back is so exploitable. Things that the team says happens to be clear. All of that at running back is not clear. But if it looks like it's just a pure committee, maybe the prices between Henderson and Stevenson actually get a lot closer. That's one of the things I talk about a decent amount in my write-up about ADP, is that you want to be looking for situations where 2 players on the same team probably will come together and use this time period to target the second one. Having said that, Henderson I think will be a riser as opposed to a faller. So you get those two big ADP values and you're like, okay, well now we've got this pretty fun, potentially unique team. And the teams can be a little bit more unique in the main event, even though there's still lots and lots of teams in the main event overall by the time it's all said and done. But then drafting to not blow it once you get those early values is the way that you do in fact blow it. So I like the fact that we still played it pretty fast and loose.
Yes, I do too. And as I've said multiple times now, and you mentioned that I was kind of overstating it by talking about how many rookies we took. It's mostly the running backs, and those are all – it's a different category from a redraft play than different positions. Our receivers – we didn't take a rookie receiver until Jalen Noel in the 16th round. Our receivers are all established guys that we know can play at the NFL level. They've produced at the NFL level. They've shown that. TJ Hawkinson is our number one tight end. And then we took 2 late rookie tight ends that just feel like the best valued tight ends that you can make, outside of the first, 5 rounds or 6, 7 rounds. Because tight end gets really expensive. And I mentioned in those middle rounds. So some of the rookie decisions that we did, I think people look at these teams and they're like, you guys just overdo it with the rookies. You've overdone it here. This team can't actually score enough redraft points. But when you think about it, like from the different positions and the ways that we attacked and ways that we build, Neighbors, Brian Thomas, JSN, Josh Downs, and then a rookie flyer late is a good wide receiver room for a thin wide receiver room. And then where we really attacked the rookies was at running back, where we built a ton of redundancy. We took 9 backs. And then also the 2 late tight ends that I mentioned. But this is a Hawkinson team, is the bet there. I think if you're right with some of these veterans, this team is really, really good. The way that this build makes sense is when you recognize and think and realize that you're going to cut like a minimum, even if your team's really good, like a minimum of a third of your first 18 picks, assuming you go kicker and DST in 19 and 20. The 18 non-kicker and DST picks, you're going to probably cut 6 of them throughout the year. Again, at a minimum, that's a good year. If you got 12 that you carried through the whole year, it's probably more like half of the 18 picks are going to be released off your team at some point because they either get hurt or they're not good enough or what have you.
Every year when I have teams that hit, I'm like, oh, I just must have really nailed those double-digit picks. If you're good at those picks, then you build these juggernauts. Then you go and look and you're like, no, there was a Bucky Irving in there, but mostly what you did was you nailed the first 10 rounds.
Yep, you nailed the first 10 picks, or you had a super high upside pick, like the Bucky Irving thing that you said, which is like, yeah, we're all looking for those 3 or 4 really high upside picks to string together. That's what the rookies are outside of the first 5 rounds. That's what you're swinging at. You're hoping that the veterans you took early in this build are those guys. The one thing I think when you look at the overall build, I think could be the fair way to frame it would be to say that because there's only 1 pick you can make in every round, there's none of these individual picks or picks that I dislike, but from round 7 through round 18, we took like 2 non-rookies. I think again, some of those rookies are going to be massive. We took a lot of running backs as well. And maybe we never took a little bit, like I really think the Josh Downs pick is huge here, but if Downs is somehow hurt or not productive as just a productive veteran, because again, it's the same concept of you don't have to be perfect. One of the things I'm surprised by every year in the sprint is looking back at the drafts of some of the top teams. I'm like, these are not very good teams. That's not that they're horrible, but a lot of the picks are like, yeah, that guy was good this year, but he wasn't amazing. And I do think sometimes it's not that you should ever swing for the layup. And we emphasize this in redraft that to hit the upside plays, you need to take a lot of swings at the upside. But this isn't a very extreme version of that, Shawn, where maybe the one thing or the way to think about it that I was referencing is just that there's an absence of non-pure upside, or at least a little bit of floor with the upside type bet through those late single-digit and double-digit rounds where you really could see a lot of like Jarquez Hunter, Dylan Sampson, Brashard Smith, J.K. Dobbins, Jalen Noel. We could look back at that whole group and those late tight ends, look back at that whole group and be like, none of those guys did anything. And if that happens, then it is, like you said, you look back at teams often and that can be the case and they can still be good. but it can be tough as well to look back on a team and have absolutely nothing there. But as we were going through those rounds, I mean, you asked me what would I do differently. As we were going through those rounds, 11, 12, you were talking about there's not a lot of guys you like in those ranges. There's not a lot of names that I would prefer. I was talking a little bit about Hollywood Brown in the 13th. He ended up going before we even had a chance to take him. I talked a little bit about Keenan Allen in the 16th, where we took Jalen Noel as maybe an option if he signs in the right place. Maybe he jumps a few rounds. I mean, you talked about, and I think correctly, he's probably just a roster clogger at best. He was not good last year. I mean, I think he would have to have a rebound season, and he already showed some signs of decline, 2-3 years ago, bounced back in 2022 and 2023 with 2 really good seasons of yards per out run over 2. But I mean, this is probably it for him now. He's 33 years old. Very talented player throughout his career, never really relied on athleticism, but feels like he's reached the point where you can't lose athleticism when you already start with so little. It feels like he's reached the point where it's just not there for him necessarily anymore. So I'm not lamenting that. And my point to wrap up this whole long point is I don't know that I can name who those veteran picks should have been right now, Sean. So I like the way that we played this. I don't really feel like there's a ton of spots where I'm like, I wouldn't want to have gotten the pick that we made. It's just that, in the micro, but it's just that in the macro, I do think the bet becomes one where, you got to have some rookie production. You got to have it early, or else you're really reliant on hitting a parlay of Neighbors, Brian Thomas, JSN, Daniels, and Hawkinson, and Downs as all being pretty productive. If you do hit that parlay, you're great, but we obviously know that you have to build redundancy at all positions, even with veterans, that there are going to be misses, there are going to be injuries. And so you don't want to be this idea of draft you're right. You don't want to be, I think, in every draft going in we're going to get all of these picks correct. Although it's easier to do that when the names I just named were your first 4 picks and Hawkinson's your 6th pick, 5 of your first 6, other than Downs. Those are the best players. So running that parlay shouldn't be too difficult. You should be able to identify good players in the early rounds. And if you can't, you're probably going to be bad anyway. Anyway, I'm talking through this a lot of different ways, but I think it's a fun thought experiment about how far can you push the rookies in a May main event. We've never done a May main event. I've never done one. I don't know if you have. They haven't always been offering them. It's more recent. Fun draft.
It was fun. The non-rookie pick there, Jordan Mason, was one of the ones that we hadn't really plotted out. I do think that's probably the right pick, even though anytime a guy comes from a little bit outside of what you had charted, you have to kind of balance that. How much do we want the faller? I say that. I mean, I think we both think it's a pretty easy value right there. The round 16 pick could be the one that we come back to and say, should have gone somewhere else. But if that's the miss, I mean, round 16 is the place to do it, because again, the expectation from that spot is very low. I love this team. Fired up for it. Be interesting to see how Jaden Daniels and the elite QB, how we feel about that. Be interesting to see how some of these guys move. It would have been, we didn't expect it, which is one of the reasons why we took Hawkinson. It would have been nice to just have a tight end value really fall to us. So you have that second tight end, and then maybe in the early part of the season, if things aren't going exactly right, you can play a tight end in one of those 2 flex spots. We don't have that set up either with this team, but again, that was part of the plan. So I think we're pretty comfortable with it. Ben, this is so much fun. We'll probably have a few more of these for the listeners as we go through. That'll do it for our first live main event, Stealing Bananas. I'm Shawn Siegele. With me, as always, is Ben Gretch. Make sure you are fired up over there at the Stealing Signals newsletter. That is bengretch.substack.com. We'd love to have you guys over RotoViz. Coupon code RVRadio2025 to check out for 10% off your 1-year sub. We love you. We'll talk to you soon.